Is it Madeleine? Because that is beautiful. Oh wow. I haven't heard that. I have not heard that name. It's gorgeous. Are you okay on a recorded line talking about your favorite fall activity?
Yes, I'm original from Panama, and I have been here in Knoxville 3 years now. And I think everything of fall, because in my home country we don't have that. So since I have been here, like just seeing the leaves changing, it's so beautiful. So yeah.
Great. Well, welcome to Knoxville 3 years later. I guess you know Morgan already. Have you guys met? No? Okay. Excellent. Well, you're talking with a lot of Knoxvillians here. And so Morgan and Abby and Beverly are all in Knoxville there with you. So yeah, excited that you're here. Thank you, everybody, for joining and for just spending your Monday night with us as we talk about a conversation that's not super easy or comfortable to talk about, but one that's so critical as we engage cross culturally and as we figure out what to do with the faith that we have and the call that we have to share that faith, along with the layers of how we share that faith through race, through different demographic information across country borders, across languages. There's so many ways that it can go wrong, but it always it always has an opportunity to self-correct and to find a way to level a playing ground for us when we find ourselves at a very flat space at the foot of the cross. So that's my encouragement as we kind of open this conversation tonight, and as we talk about the layers of what Mecdez has shared with us in her book, A Just Mission. I think back to something that my husband read recently from Richard Rohr that said that the love of Christ and the message of the gospel always burns. It always burns us, but it never burns us to the point of being scorched. And I think that that's so powerful as we think about the God that we serve and the way that we're constantly being remade, right? Being remade in an image of a being that's so much greater than us. None of us chose to be born in the countries that we originated from. None of us chose our families of origin. We didn't choose our race. We didn't choose our socioeconomic status at birth. And so all of those things are things that we shouldn't carry. I'll speak from a white perspective, guilt from. And I think when guilt motivates us, then that can turn really negative really quickly. But there are things that we do need to navigate through, right? Because of the way that society works. So I'm curious. I'm just going to open it up at first to see if there were things that you guys read in the first four chapters of this book that you underlined, or something that you've discovered so far. I've got a list of questions here, but I want to start with just leaving it to things that are on your heart and that motivated you to be here tonight to talk about. What's something that you noted, or something that you found interesting or compelling, or something that you questioned in the first four chapters of A Just Mission?
So I'll go ahead and start. So I thought it was interesting, but it made me think a lot, because I'm not, so like the author came here from her home country. Um, I'm born and raised in the United States and have like Native American ancestry, but a lot of her experiences were my experience, even though this is my home country. Um, a lot of the same kind of comments. Well, where are you from? Well, I'm from Texas. I'm born here. Well, but when did your family come over? I said, we have records of us here since the 1700s. I don't know. Um, and so it was interesting. I guess for me, it made me realize that, hey, that shouldn't be normal. Whereas, um, as I was reading, I could kind of sense her frustration and her anger. And those things didn't always bother me because I was just used to them. But it did kind of open my eyes to maybe I shouldn't be used to things like that.
So maybe just because of your lived experience, Ashley, you have come to just expect conversations around faith or church or even your own nationality to be a certain way. And how does that, I mean, how does that sit with you when you think about what you have come to just expect versus what the role of writing those expectations, could be? Whose responsibility is that? And is it something that we should write in its direction?
That's a good question. I think I'm still figuring all of that out. I did like later on in the other chapters how she did talk about the Native American experience, and so I appreciated that. And I think speaking for myself personally, it's hard to rewrite a narrative because my culture has been erased. I don't know what traditions we had. I can't go to books and find that information. And so other people just acknowledging what has happened, it does help me feel seen. And so I am appreciative of that. And maybe even like more conversations of that. Like I was telling my husband, I said, I can't really explain it to you, but it's a pain of just not knowing your culture and your identity. Because, my family, we assimilated. I don't speak Spanish. I don't have any of those um, indigenous qualities. But it is like a painful longing for wanting to know just where you come from.
Mhm. So powerful. And I'm curious, what those of you who are living abroad or have worked abroad have noticed where someone's culture and someone's DNA is really written, right? In the culture that they originate from, and how that impacts their ability to access the gospel narrative in a way that is unique, maybe from the one that you originated from. It's not a super clear question, but I'd like to pull on that thread a little bit if we can. Let me shade it with some context. My oldest daughter was born in Uganda. She's a native Ugandan. She has dual citizenship now. Beverly, you understand this, having kiddos that have Haitian American citizenships as well. Um, and she is currently, bless her heart, bless, so, I mean, God, goodness, she blesses her own heart with, over me. I was like, Mom, you really put me through it. She's been educated in 5 countries. And so she's currently in a therapeutic school that's very close to her birth culture. And I got to visit her this week and was asking, Hope, do you think that a school as amazing as this could ever exist in the United States? And she said no. And I said, why do you think that is? And she said, because people in America don't know how to be in a village. They don't know how to be in a community. And everything is just so focused on each individual person that they don't know how to hold each other accountable to what it means to be a part of a greater community. And I thought that was really powerful. Um, how does that impact, the way that churches are formed, the way that faith is shared across cultures? Does anybody want to tug on that thread a little bit?
This isn't directly answering your question, but it was one of the things that I found interesting about some of the chapters. Um, I don't remember which chapter it was exactly, but where she was talking about how when she moved to the US, part of her independence is what she appreciated. She appreciated being able to have some of that separation until it came time to having trouble and difficulty and grief and those things where community really does make a difference. Um, so I hadn't considered some of that perspective before. I know we're a very individualistic uh, culture, but the way that we create community differently, and the impact in the way that she had that her it excuse me, from her perspective was very unique, I thought, and I appreciated the way that she drew that out.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so powerful when we think about the ways that even I'm sure that that impacts the ways that we choose a church here in the United States, especially in parts of the country where there are heavily saturated in churches, where we choose our groups based off of our affinity groups or our particular flavor or the types of worship that we want or the types of um, people that we want to worship with. And I wonder if that's quite different. It's different than the churches that I've been lucky enough to be, able to worship with in other parts of the world. But what else would how else would you guys tug on that thread? I'm going to keep saying that phrase, apparently. I don't want to read this transcript back.
Um, so I do a lot of missions work in the Philippines and have been doing so for 16 years. Um, and like hearing the Philippine nation, especially like Metro Manila area, is very Americanized. And so like even the churches, so as I'm reading this, even the churches with the people that I've made relationship with and are connected with, they were churches started by Americans. And so this book made me really like, when we go back in the summer, like maybe we should try to find a different one, And so it did challenge me a bit. I don't know. It brought that up, and I think I would ask my Filipino friends, why do you guys always come to these American churches, but over there they idolize American culture. But it's sad because I think that their culture is beautiful and unique. And I remember telling one of them, like, I don't want 50 years down the road, um, you guys to feel like how I feel of not really knowing your culture, because you've just assimilated into another.
Yeah, that's a huge risk, right? With any kind of church planting, any kind of mission framing, and I think there are definitely things to honor in people who have gone before us, and there are all the way that globalization has changed the conversation of church, the way that everyone having access to being able to tell their own story has impacted this. You're probably going to hear a 3-year-old coming into my room. It sounds like, or maybe not. I heard a little cry. The way that our phones have allowed us to tell our own story has brought the ability to find each other and honor and celebrate our birth cultures in a way that overpowers any kind of Western influence is wonderful. And also the church is grappling with that right now. Like, oh, I don't know, what do we do? Like the amount of people who are going on mission trips right now compared to pre-COVID is vastly different. And so the next generation is kind of looking at this like, I don't want to be a part of the problem. I don't want to be an American savior, to the rest of the world. And so, what are some things maybe that you've seen done that are positive? What are some ways that you've seen people rebuilding since COVID or over the last couple of decades that you think are effective? Have you seen something that gives you hope?
I don't want to be the only one talking, but
Mhm.
recently I went to the CAFO conference. It was in Houston this year, and I was meeting in with the Southeast Asian groups, and so it was just all the missionaries that have planted themselves there. And there was this girl about my age, and she said that she always had a dream of opening an orphanage. in Southeast Asia. And so after she graduated, she went, and that's what she did. She goes, but now I know better. And I've transitioned away from that, and I'm here and I'm trying to relearn. And that was just inspiring to me, because it's hard to, like, I don't know, like, she lived there for so many years, learned the language, planted herself in the culture. Um, I mean, and she's still doing work there, but it wasn't, she just, when she realized the damage that it was causing, uh, she was obedient and faithful to see, okay, well, God, how can you use me in a way that's not as harmful? And so that just really inspired me.
It wasn't Kimberly Quinley with Step Ahead, was it, Ashley?
I don't know. I didn't catch her name, but
Okay.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, please do. I saw a picture of her teaching and sitting in a small group. And if it is, and you go back, her husband
Okay.
took me to the hospital when my third kid was being born, and
Oh, wow.
are remarkable people, and they are
Yes.
so dear. They are truly changing the way that orphanages are talked about within the Thai context,
Mm-hmm.
because what had happened was there were
Mm-hmm.
so many people who were becoming pastors in order to open orphanages, in order
Mm-hmm.
to pull kids away from their families so
Mm-hmm.
that they could have their salaries paid for by American churches, because they knew that American churches would put their kids into, or they knew that American churches would pay their salaries to love on and care for
Yeah.
orphanages, because we're mandated to do that in James.
Right.
So then it just became kind of a vacuum where
Yeah.
kids were being pulled out of their families. And in some villages, 85 to 93% of the kids were being raised in institutionalized care, apart from their families. And that just
Mm-hmm.
such a norm.
Yeah, that's how it is in the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Heartbreaking.
So, mm-hmm.
I'm the
Okay.
kind of teacher that calls on people, so I'm just gonna call out Madeline. What did if you read the first four chapters, or if you've read some of this, anything come to the surface for you, or any part of this conversation, kind of anything you'd like to highlight?
Yes, I think like in the direction of hope, because I came from another country like 3 years ago, and like my first experience was difficult to find a church because there are so many churches like here in Knoxville. Like in along with that, different denominations that in my home country we didn't have that. So it was just like visiting churches. But God was so like faithful that He led me to a church where it's a church planted or like a satellite church, but like the missionary heart of the people there was just so welcoming, and just having community there that will like inviting me to different houses like in different holidays. So when I was reading the part when she's saying that like a lot of international students are never invited, I was just like, wow, God, thank you, because I am part of that small percentage that has been invited and welcome. So yeah, I think it's just thinking about that, and also the importance of discipleship in the sense that I have like been in some short missionary trips, um and lately I have been just like thinking through like sharing the gospel, it's important, but also like how we invest and do life with that people in order to just be along them, to like to be instruments of God, to for their life to be transformed. So I think that's something that stood out for me also. So yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you've had that experience, and so glad that church has been an avenue for that. You seeking that out was probably just as powerful as the hospitable hearts that you found. And so, but it warms my heart to know that you've found a place and a community to be a part of. Um, I have a question to pose, but Elizabeth, I'm wondering if there's something that's on your mind that you'd like to bring to the surface first.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking more about the chapter 4, the contextualizing theology, because so I've been in this current village for 10 years now, so in this area, and where I'm at, there is no church. There are no known believers for quite some distance from where we are. There is a ethnic minority group that meets together about like a few hours from here. So yeah, we've been thinking through just kind of changing our perspective on what this looks like as being a foreigner in this location. And there are some national missionaries that have been trained to kind of come up to these areas too. And so just like excited about that, but they've had some struggles and have had to like they found it very challenging to work in this area. So they have actually left and had to get more training. And so it's just a very unique place. But one thing that I've noticed, and that we've been trying to just talk through is we've noticed a lot more people coming over, that have made comments like, when we've talked about the local body here in this country, well, what is their theology like? Like it's not matching what we think the theology should be, or, that kind of like more superiority. So that's been kind of challenging for me as we've seen just kind of the new group of people coming over so I really liked this chapter of how she shared, like, we're not listening to voices from these places, because a lot of times, especially from where we are, there's not a lot that's written down for us to look at. But, we have the theology from mainly white Western men. And so, yeah, this has been on our heart for a while. So I was just good timing with the book. But just seeing a lot more of that, and I guess that's not hopeful. That's kind of more disheartening on that side. But like, how can we, yeah, how can this change for the future? And what will that look like? Yeah.
It's such a nuanced challenge that we bring to the field, and one that is more than how we plant churches or whether we're putting um, a box of ties at the back of an auditorium, like I saw in Bangkok, where you have to clip it on to go into worship, or just things that are not contextually accurate. But once we've kind of gotten over that hump, and I see this a lot too, we say the right language, we say we want to work our way out of a job or whatever, but when it comes down to the granular pieces of really pulling apart theology, then we're still holding on to any level of superiority that we can. And that becomes really, at that point, in my mind, a moment of spiritual formation where we are having to choose what we hold on to as our idol. And is it holding up a local body of believers, or is it trying to make a copy of the body of believers that we left? And that's a tricky one. That's a really tricky one, especially with the level of theology and theological rigor that we can debate all day long, and we have seminary degrees, and we can pull apart all kinds of things through the English translation of a Bible. But what does that mean for others? It's tricky. Anybody want to speak to that? Or Elizabeth, do you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to add another thing about kind of the cultural differences, because those that go to the States deal with like the individual that change, and of course, being outside of your home culture, you really start seeing things from a different perspective. And I find myself, I have to be careful because I can be quite critical of my home culture, um, and I mean that's not always bad, but one thing like I love about here is the community aspect of life, but there are challenges in that. And a big one is for people to come to know him apart from anyone else is extremely difficult, almost impossible. It feels like, because of the amount of pressure or persecution that they're going to deal with. So just even the way we think, having to relearn things when you come into another culture of this isn't just like, I'm going to share with this person and this person's going to make, it's your faith and it's so individualized when really, even in the early church, you saw those examples of like this person in their household came and this person is, and so like, that's what we've been asking for since the beginning is that whole families, whole households would come because you can't do that individual way that that we're used to in the States, in these cultures. So yeah, just like even thinking, because she kind of brought that up too, of Mac really truly understanding. And again, as an outsider, we can only do so much. We can only understand so much. It's so important to connect with local believers and local people that understand the culture. And I know, in different situations, like kind of just like I explained earlier, our situation where we are is challenging because there aren't anyone here, but there are in the country that we do connect with. And yeah, just so important to not, we always bring a bias. We always bring, of course, that's going to be in everything that we have because we grew up that way, but just to truly try to lay these things aside and understand. I think also I just was impressed with her candor. Like she just said stuff. She was just straight, man. And I really appreciated that because I find myself being very, like I want to make sure I say things correctly, or I don't want to step on toes too much. And I'm kind of getting to the point where it's like, just gotta, just gotta do it. I don't know. That was like refreshing for me to just hear how she said all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think she's found her own critiques from that, but she stands by her words, as she said in our last call. Sorry, Ashley, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, I was just going to comment on that chapter as well. I loved it. It's probably the one I highlighted the most. And it really excited me. And I think I bring a unique perspective because I wasn't raised in the church. And so I didn't get saved until college. And so like when she's talking about how the Holy Spirit is already preparing the way. And I told my husband, like, that is so true because I remember I coincidentally went to a Christian university and I thought everybody was weird and crazy. But then I eventually pulled out a Bible and I started reading, and I would have like flashbacks to my childhood and things that I had seen, like spiritual things or, things that I didn't understand. And I was like, oh my God, he had been pursuing me all this time. And out of the context of a church or being in small groups or anything, but he was finding me where I'm at. And that's what he's doing all around the world. We just failed to see that. Um, and it also reminded me of a book I read in college. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about cross-cultural ministry. And it was about this priest who had went in and lived with a tribe for many years, wasn't making any progress. And he was just about to like give up, and then he said that one night they were sitting around a fire and one of the tribesmen said, I think I finally understand what you've been trying to tell us. And he's like, well, tell me what you understand. He goes, well, this Jesus that you talk of, he's like a lion. And then he just goes into this long explanation of why he thinks Jesus is like a lion, because the lion pursues its prey and blah, 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 and devours it. And he's like, this Jesus that you're talking about, he's relentless in his pursuit, and he won't stop until he devours you, and it's just like, there's their theology been being written. And I loved how she always referred to Philip. And it's just like, yeah, like how many of us are coming around people that are different from us and saying, like, hey, asking questions instead of just trying to teach, asking questions and then letting them invite you in to teach, you know? And so I don't know, that chapter really excited me. It was probably my favorite of them all.
So good. So good. I had chills when it's the different understandings and the different portrayals of the gospel that always stop me still, because we have a friend who used to be on staff here with us, and he talks a lot about this contextualization piece and how good news has to answer to bad news. And so there's no way that you can tell someone good news unless you know what their bad news is. And so much of us in the United States are geared towards a legal gospel that is, well, you are a sinner and you need, forgiveness. He's like, there's so many different frames that people are looking for. I would never go into a brothel and tell a bunch of women that they're sinners. But good news, if somebody's gonna say, like, that's just not that's not the frame, right? And so he kind of laid out different gospel pathways. If you've read the 3D gospel, he takes that and then kind of expands on that. But um, I love I had one opportunity. I'll share this story and then I'll pass to another question. But I had one opportunity to get to witness someone in the country where we worked hearing about the good news for the first time. And he had been coming to our house for a while to cut coconuts out of the tree. My husband had treated him for medical things once or twice, and his kids. And he came over one day completely distraught because his wife had left him, and he didn't know what he was going to do. And he came over with the kids. And thankfully, we had some of our fellow believers at our house that were nationals. And I looked at them and I said, I could tell this man something in very, very juvenile, my juvenile version of the local language. Or you guys should just actually just go talk to him. And so I got to watch this couple make the presentation to him and tell him a story. And as soon as he heard what this couple had to say to him, his knees hit the grass in the front of my house. Like, his whole body responded to the idea. And they said to him, they were like, how would you feel if your son right here had been raised was kidnapped away from you at birth, and for 20 years was told by another man, that you hated him? And he was like, that would be terrible. I'd hate that. And he said, that's what our Father feels about you. You've been kidnapped and someone has made you feel terrible about yourself and told you that you have no worth and this and this and that. And we're here to tell you that your Father's been here the whole time and loves you so much. And it took him to his knees. And I think back on that so much. The different ways that people access the story that has motivated us to be where we are is so unique and so rich. And so, Elizabeth, I love that you're engaging national leaders, to have that conversation and to think through what does it look like for someone from another province in your country, to be there and doing that work and working alongside of you guys. It really does fast track a lot of things. I'm curious what, speaking of that, if there is a need for local leadership, what are some practical ways that maybe churches in the US and organizations in the US like ours might really actually empower local leaders instead of overshadowing them? I know we love to use that word empower, and sometimes it's overused, but have you seen examples, or do you have ideas of ways that Western churches and organizations can better uphold the wisdom and the local wisdom that is there in the places where you work?
I think one of the biggest things for me that I'm seeing is not coming in with this attitude of we have the right way. Like, that's what's been, I just have felt more and more of that tension. And it's interesting because I feel like it's swinging more, honestly, with some of the new people coming over, the new
Really?
foreign missionaries. This idea of like, well, they have a church and they're meeting together, but they're listening to the wrong theology. And yes, you can see, we can do that even in our own, like you can see pitfalls and different things, but it's this, again, this idea of the superiority. And if you come in that way, you're not going to have mutual respect for each other. And it really saddens me because I I have just fallen in love with the global church. Like just the things that I have learned, that I have grown in my own walk because of their perspectives. Like I have read the Bible my entire life, and reading it with a local person, a local believer who has like brought out something else, and I'm like, what? How did I never see that before? And that, of course, they're coming from a culture more closely related to where when the Bible is written in. So it's just so rich. And so I think for people coming in, I don't have like a great answer for like how I think I'm still working through this in my own, like, what does this actually look like? How can this actually be a good thing? But I think the first step is just that, recognizing that we're coming together as brothers and sisters in Christ on this equal playing field, that there is not this superiority because of the theology that we hold. That's just the first step. And again, I'm just kind of in this too, just thinking through. I mean, I've been kind of in this place for a few years trying to sort out. And I know every place is different. Like I think I mean, Lauren, you were here, it's a unique place compared to maybe like a place in Africa or a place, in South America. There's, it's differences, but yeah, I love that she really kind of hammered that point of the mutuality. And I think I wrote down something. She talked about, actually, I think this is in chapter 5, because I thought we were going through chapter 5, so I read a little bit about this. But she talked about the relational approach, meaning like recognizing that mission is not about saving others, but about walking alongside them in a spirit of solidarity and partnership. And even I was thinking that even with like the local body here, doing it in that way. So actually, I'd love to just hear other people, maybe if there's anyone here who's kind of done that or has ideas or what they've seen. I mean, I just am now just starting to understand what you're organizing. I don't really know much. I found this through Instagram. So if there's anything that, yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to just see the shift, like my heart is to see that mutuality more in a, yeah, just in a
Yeah.
better way.
That's
Presented.
great. I was actually going to bump to Morgan and Abby to share a little bit about that, because when I came home, Elizabeth, from where you
Yeah.
work, I was wrecked. I was like, we cannot keep going like this. We cannot keep doing things the way that we've been doing. Abby was, I don't know if it was a blessing or a curse to be around me at that time, and as we were building an organization, and then we met Morgan, and was already also doing it, and merged our organizations and took the name of Seed. And so I'd love to hear maybe, Morgan, from your experiences in Haiti and now in Uganda. Abby, you have been weathering this with me over the last 5 or 6 years as well. So what, in your experience living there and having a multi-ethnic team, and some of these things we have great ideas about, and then the practicality of it is like, this is why it's hard, and then some things it's we've just been floored at the stories that have kind of unfolded before us. So Morgan, let me start with, no, which one of you? You
I
both
can
like to have a
start.
script.
I can
So
start. I have something that I wanted to share that's like not exactly speaking to what we do at Seed, but is more of like a personal story. So I'll speak to that, and then Morgan, I'll pass it to you. But um, when my husband and I were living in Uganda last year, we and this is like it feels a little bit disconnected, which is why I haven't like brought it up yet. But I also feel like it really speaks to the beauty of leaning into other cultures and other people groups and the way that they view the Lord. And so when we went to Uganda, we started going to a church that was just in town. My coworker goes there, so we were going with him, and just a lot of our Ugandan community goes there. It was, I think, maybe originally started by Americans, but it's completely Ugandan led. I think a lot of the like structure of the church itself was maybe started by Americans as a specific denomination in the United States that started it. And so you can kind of see some of those patterns that mirror that of the United States. And but it's completely Ugandan led. So it's like kind of like that denomination, but also just not at all. And I grew up in this particular denomination and have a lot of just like a lot of baggage there and have been like kind of deconstructing my faith since I left for college and just from that denominational background. And so when we went to Uganda, the last place I expected to go was to this specific denomination, but that's where we ended up going. And while there's a lot of things about it that like maybe wouldn't be my preference, maybe in style of music or, structure or whatever, it was extremely healing for me. And that's because it was completely Ugandan led and they approached so much of the theology that I grew up hearing, they approached it with a different angle that was really like healing for me. To I don't know, just yeah, it was just healing. I don't know a better word. It was healing for me to see that kind of that framework of theology in a new way and through the lens of their culture. And so yeah, I just think that's been one of the coolest experiences for me is like we didn't go over there as missionaries. We were just there to like live and enjoy the tropical weather and work and I felt like we were like ministered to so much during our time there. Where it's a place that it's a big missionary hub where we were. And so most people who look like us and are from where we are there with kind of this attitude of like we're starting churches, we're helping people. And I think because we didn't really come there with that perspective, it really helped us be able to be like ministered to by those people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Morgan, I'm sorry, I'm coming to you next, but just to color out what Abby's talking about, I had a very similar experience in that exact same church that she's talking about because we lived there in 2016 and also same denominational background, a little bit of baggage. And 2016, we were there for a worship service with a visiting preacher from India who had clearly been trained in an American theology school in India from our denomination and came to Uganda to preach. Okay, so our friends our Ugandan friends are translating for him, and his sermon topic was women's roles in the church. And
What a
so
bold topic to come in and like preach at a guest church.
so
So weird.
bold. So bold. And so our friend who's translating is like watching the women in the audience who are like getting a little spicy in their seats. And he is translating but not directly. He's like adding a little colorful language and a little bit like, we don't really believe this, but I'm going to tell you what he said, kind of thing. And so I'm watching this entire thing unfolds. The visiting preacher is very gung ho about and is getting his heels in a little bit more as he sees women snickering in the back. He's like, we're going to hammer in this theology, and I'm going to preach Second Timothy to you until you believe it. And so at the end of the sermon, the preacher gets up and he says, "Thank you." Very honoring, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. And does anyone have anything they'd like to say? And Miss Ida, who's the matriarch of the church, stands up in the back and she goes, "I just have a question for the visiting preacher. Um, are the women allowed to take communion today, or should we come back on another day of the week?" And it's just the most little, I don't know. It was great. And then the preacher said, "Actually, Miss Ida, I would like to escort you down the aisle to be the first one to take communion today." And he walked back and he put her arm through his arm and he escorted her down. And to me, that was just incredibly healing, right? To see the way that their church was practicing community, was honoring of the women and the people that they knew who were there, the culture and the way that they worshiped it, the way that they took communion and allowed for people to give money or avocados or whatever they had, and that 4 months that I was there was incredibly healing to me also. And so Elizabeth, I just, yeah, absolutely agree with what you're saying and how the theology of a local context it allows us to find meaning in scripture in a new way. Sorry, Morgan, that was more than a 2-minute frame, but what else have you seen, Morgan?
Well, I wanted to highlight a couple quotes that I've been chat GPTing over here because I'm an audiobook listener, and unfortunately that makes it so I don't have I can't highlight anything if I'm listening to it. So I was pulling up the quotes to figure out the parts that I had heard and thought, man, that's really good. But one of them was when we assume that we're bringing God to others, we deny that God has already been present with them. And I feel like that kind of sums up what many of us are saying and thinking as we've been talking tonight is just, man, that'll just really hit you. And I think the traditional kind of ideas around going on mission trips and bringing the gospel to unreached people groups and all of those kinds of things that we, or at least that I have was brought up in, it really turns that on its head and challenges the assumption that I can do anything for anyone that that God isn't already doing. Um, and then another quote that really stuck out was that the world doesn't need more saviors, it needs servants who are willing to learn. And I think that that really leads into the work that we are doing at Seed. And honestly, I would love to sit here and say like we've figured it out. Like we understand mutuality and missions. Come learn from us. And honestly, the more that I do and the more that I interact with people and the more conversations I have, the more I realize that I don't know anything. And honestly, just the willingness to learn is a key piece of what we're doing at Seed. And we have messed up and have relearned, and we are going to keep doing that. Hopefully, less of the messing up part. Um, but that's just kind of central and, not really glorifying the messing up because I think that as a white evangelical person, I can speak for myself in saying that uh, we do that sometimes and leave our um, people across the globe to like clean up our messes, and that's not what I'm saying here. But I think being able to admit those mistakes and then learn from those is central to what we're doing. And so conversations like this, these book clubs that we're hosting are ways that we are doing that and kind of exploring and list their voices and other people who have been doing it or living these experiences. And so that's not the exact work that we do at Seed, but it's kind of more of a heart posture behind it.
Yeah, and I think anyone who claims that they have the formula doesn't have the formula. And I mean, we literally had a call last week with our team with a situation, an entrepreneur that we've been supporting for a couple years that we just finished the book When Helping Hurts in the spring. And we're finding ourselves in a situation where we're like, oh my gosh, like, have we created dependency? How do we like wean off the support, but also like support her well? And like, it's complicated. Like, it's really messy. And I think any kind of relational work is messy, and that's what mutuality is. It's relational. It's leaning into that, and it's always going to be messy. But yeah, I think you said that well, Morgan. Like, it's more of a posture thing. I think it's less about like here's the exact steps. Of course, there's like good advice that people have that have gone before us, but I think more than anything, it's just having that a big posture of humility and being willing to be like, maybe we didn't approach this the right way. How can we do better going forward?
Yeah, and I think, just being able to have those honest conversations, knowing what the values of the culture are, and always going back to those. If there is an exchange of money, right? Like to say, hey, I know that your highest value is, or a high value for you is that we're in a communal relationship here, and you don't want to owe me anything. You want to be able to be reciprocal. So how do we work that out? And just having open conversations there. As a person from the West, I found it very helpful for me to be able to speak very directly to people who are on my teams and to say, look, I realize that there are probably some things in your culture that you're not allowed to express because you have to push down your own ideas in order to keep a cohesiveness with your group. group. And so if there's something that you want to offload, and just tell somebody that's not going to take that anywhere else. I can be that direct listening ear that's not going to take that back to the group and not going to judge you for having an idea that stands above or apart from your group. And that was very freeing and healing for people on my team in Southeast Asia. And that was a positive that I could bring as someone who was comfortable, right, with direct communication and very individualistic thinking. It's not super easy. And as we're wrapping up, I think Abby and Morgan are right. Anyone who says that they've got to figure it out probably doesn't, because every situation is so unique. And that's what the power of being people of faith really is that we get to know people as humans first. We get to know them as people of worth, and every situation, if it's not being led by the Holy Spirit, it's going to get even messier than sometimes impossibly messy, but the Holy Spirit is a critical part of our relationships and our understanding with each other. So, right. Anything else as we wrap up? We've got one more minute. A quote or a thought or something that anybody would like to leave us with. Okay. Well, guys, we've got one more meeting on this book. And so if you have your calendars out, or if you don't have it marked already, it's going to be November the 10th at 7 p.m. Central. So that's 8 Eastern. I have no idea if we're going to have a daylight savings between now and then, and if that will line up. Okay, we will. I am the worst at all of that. And so Abby will probably have to text me ahead of time, be like, get with it, Lauren. But November 10th at 7 p.m. Central, whatever time that means, a month from now. And we'll be talking about chapters 5 through 10 on that night. And I'm just so grateful that you guys made it tonight. Thank you for taking time in your morning. If you're in the East, and yeah, it's so good to see your faces. And to Becca, I want to hear a lot more from you next time. I'm gonna call you out a lot more, because I think there's a lot of richness there that I probably talked over.
Thank y'all so much for being here. I'll send follow-up emails, so we'll remind you about the date and stuff, but really grateful you guys were all here.
Yeah.
Much for your experience and insight.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you.